2019. My name's Randy Hoyt. I'm one of the guests here, and they asked me to share a little bit about what's new at Foxtrot Games, and I figured it would be a good chance to also show all the things that we've done, just to give you an idea of our background, who we are, and what we're doing now, and show you some of our latest release and a couple of games that will be coming out on Kickstarter or released later in the next 6 months. So I will start. My name is Randy Hoyt. Like I said, I'm a co-founder of Foxtrot Games. It started with my stepbrother and I, Tyler Siegel. He's a graphic designer in Portland, and at a family reunion, we were hanging out and said we should make a board game. We were both playing lots of games, and he'd been wanting to run a Kickstarter campaign and try his hand at product design. So we designed the Relic Expedition. This was our first game. It's a jungle exploration game, so that you have a bunch of tiles that as you explore throughout the game, it expands. Every map will be different every time that you explore, kind of an Indiana Jones type theme. You're trying to collect treasures in the jungle. So we ran a Kickstarter for that. He did all the art, I did the game design, and that was in March 2013. We ran a Kickstarter. Had a successful Kickstarter. It's small compared to Kickstarters these days, but back then there weren't a lot of board games on Kickstarter. So I think 2011, 2012 is when the first real wave of board games on Kickstarter happened. So we had 600 backers and raised $40,000 and got to go through the whole experience of manufacturing a game. There's a lot you can do before you start manufacturing, design and prototyping and all that, but once you get $40,000 in cash to try to make a board game, it's a pretty exciting process. So we got through all that, delivered to backers around November, December. The minimum print order at our manufacturer was 1,500, so that was, we knew we'd have some left over to sell. And we have sold most of them now over the last, 5 years, 6 years. I have a few in my guest room closet up on the upper shelf. We didn't make a ton of money off of it, but it was a good learning experience, and we had a lot of fun doing it. And going through that process, we realized what we really liked was the product design side of things. So taking a game that already exists, and that's the way the board game industry typically works. Designers will make a game and pitch it to a publisher, kind of like in the book industry. So you'll write a manuscript and then try to find someone to help you publish it. So we thought we'd try our hand at that. So I'd been following a lot of people on Twitter, board game designers and things, and networking at cons, and told people we were looking for submissions. And so we got a submission that we played and we really loved and started down that process. So this is our best-selling game. It was our second one. It's called Lanterns, the Harvest Festival. It's a tile-laying game where you are decorating Palace Lake in Imperial China with tiles that have floating lanterns on them. So you're placing tiles, you're earning lantern cards, you're turning them in for dedications of various types of sets. So you either want 4 all the same color, 3 pairs, 3 different colors, or all 7 uniques from all the different colors. So as you're going, you're turning these in for points. The game did well on Kickstarter. It was a bit bigger. We had doubled our backer count, and it was a cheaper game, so I think the actual dollar amount was less, but we had got double the backers we had, and after that, Renegade Game Studios, who was another new publisher, approached me about helping us get the game into distribution afterwards. And that was a huge step for the company early on. We had 1,200 backers, and we're probably going to print 2,500 copies of the game without a real strong plan to sell them, just like with our first game. So Renegade, Scott Gata at Renegade had a great history with distributors from some other companies he had run, great relationship with retailers, and really helped us get the game out there. Will Wheaton saw the game and really liked it, so he played it on tabletop. That video has over 1 million views. That has helped, and it has been a strong seller for us ever since. So that came out in 2015. It's still our most popular, best-selling game. So that is Lanterns, the Harvest Festival. After that, so we continue to do about 1 game a year. The next game I don't have, World's Fair 1893, was another Kickstarter. We got about 1,400 backers. Went through the same process, delivered to backers, and then went through Renegade into stores. And that has continued to sell. That came out in 2016? Yeah, and we've sold multiple print runs of that as well. After that, we started to try some different things. So we had an established line with Lanterns, and we did an expansion for Lanterns. That one we went straight to retail with. That also did pretty well. We did multiple printings of that, which was a lot of fun. It was interesting to try to expand on a game that a lot of people said what was great about Lanterns was it's simple and elegant, and we tried a few different things before we were able to find a way to expand it in a way that felt natural and not too clunky. And so we got a lot of people say that that expansion is essential, and we love that. So that has been a good hit. And then we put out a game that I thought was going to be a crazy risk, but has also done very well. This is The Fox in the Forest. It's a 2-player only trick-taking game. So it's cards with numbers and suits. And when the designer pitched it to me, Josh Bergel, we played it, and we loved it, but we were like, I don't know if people are going to want a deck of 33 cards for a 2-player only game, but it's too good. It has to exist, is what we said. So we got an artist who hadn't done very many games. I think she'd done some indie RPGs, but she did a lot of work for Scholastic and actually doing children's books. And so we set this in a fairy tale world, and people love the art. So all of the odd cards have special abilities, and they have special then characters. So there's a woodcutter and a fox and a monarch and a witch and these kinds of things. So it's a 2-player trick-taking game like Hearts or Spades. So all the players will play a card, and the highest one in the lead suit will win. There's a trump suit that can beat that. You have to follow suit if you can. But what really made this game unique was the player abilities, or the character abilities. So like when you play a fox, it gives you the opportunity to change the trump suit. When you play a woodcutter, you can draw another card and then discard a card from your hand. So it gives you a lot more agency than you might have in some of the classic trick-taking games. And then the scoring system. The goal of the game is to win each hand the most tricks, but not too many. So there's 13 tricks total. If you get 7 to 9, that's the most, and you will get the most points for the hand. But if you get more than that, if you get up to 10, then you bust, and your opponent gets all the points. So each hand, you're like, is this a hand I can get 7 to 9? Is it too strong? I'm going to get too many? Is it weak that I need to try to change the trump suit to make it stronger? Or is it so weak that I can actually go low and get the 0 to 3 to score that? So as you're playing back and forth, you're sort of reevaluating constantly the strength of your hand. So this one has done really well, I think, because of the art. It's really easy to sell. We just show people the art and they want to buy it. And it has depth that people who like this style of game really love. So this one I think is going to pass Lanterns as our best-selling game here soon. It's a smaller price, of course, but this one has been a lot of fun. So I'm so glad that we did this game. It was, like I said, it was one of those where, like, well, I don't know if people will buy it, but we really love it and want it to exist. So we took a chance on it. We've done a couple other games since. I think I don't have Sunday Split either. We did a small I Split You Choose ice cream themed card game. And then we did a pretty big epic game for us. This took us a lot of effort. This one was called Spy Club. We did a Kickstarter for this also. It's you're playing young detectives solving neighborhood mysteries, and it has a really cool campaign system where you can play 5 games together in a campaign. And each successive game after the first, you unlock some new module that'll change the rules. So it'll change how you solve aspects. It'll give your characters abilities. It'll give you bad events that might hinder you. And it's all related to the theme of the case that you're solving as to which module you'll unlock. For example, if your neighbor turns out to be the master suspect, there's a whole module around how you have to follow her. You learn that, spoiler, you learn that your neighbor is into mini golf, and so you have to go through the mini golf course and follow her to try to get some extra clues. So the way you confirm clues and the way you solve the aspects are now tied to this mini golf course that you're going around. And the box comes with 40 modules, so each campaign, even over a series of 5 games, you only play 4 of them. So you could play 10 campaigns before you'll have seen all of these little crazy modules. And that one was so much fun to work on, coming up with all the different modules and themes. So, and then I will just move on now to what's new. So this is our latest release. It is called Lanterns Dice. This was a really fun one to work on. So we loved the artwork for the lanterns on the cards, and somebody came to us with an idea for a roll and write game where you've got your own score sheet with a pencil that you're filling in spaces, and you're rolling these dice with lanterns on them. And so they came to us with this design idea. We said, we love the idea of a Lanterns dice game. The version you've brought doesn't quite fit with the Lanterns universe enough, so let's work together to design a new one. And so we worked with Chris Bryan through a couple of different iterations to find a way to make a Lanterns dice roll and write game that really felt like it fit in Lanterns. So one of the cool things in there is, in Lanterns, the tiles have lanterns on all 4 sides, and the way you play the tile, whichever direction you're facing determines who gets what lantern. So if you place it so the red side of the tile is facing you. You get a red card, and everybody else gets the side that's facing them. So what we did for this is we designed a plastic tray that you roll 4 dice into that then have that same perspective. So you get to rotate the dice tray, and whichever die is facing you, you get to color in. So you fill in your sheet, and you are taking tiles and placing like polyomino Tetris style pieces onto the areas as you color them in to fill in different lantern shapes. That one is out now. We have it for sale in our booth. Our booth is in 901. Just you want to check it out and see some of these games in action. So that's our release for this year. And the next 2 things that we are working on is we are preparing a Kickstarter campaign for October for this game, which we're super excited about. This is The Search for Planet X. It is an app-driven logic puzzle deduction game. So each game you'll use the app to generate a map of the solar system. They'll put following a number of logic rules. So it'll have like every map has 2 comets and they're only in prime numbered sectors. Every map has 4 asteroid fields and they're each adjacent to at least one other asteroid field. And throughout the game you'll interact with the app. So you'll ask it, you'll do a scan, for example, for asteroid fields in sectors 1 to 5. And it might tell you there are 2 asteroid fields in these sectors. So you'll be able to start crossing things off and circling things on a deduction sheet as you try to narrow down where these things are. You'll publish theories, which will go through peer review and may get revealed to everybody once they're confirmed correct. You can go to conferences where you'll learn a particular rule for your game, like all comets are within 2 sectors of an asteroid field, for example. So you'll get to piece together all these logic rules, and eventually you'll be able to deduce where this hypothetical planet X must be, given all the other objects that you can find in the sky. So you're competing, trying to be the first to find it. You score points for finding planet X, as well as scoring points for publishing theories about different objects in the sky. We do have that one in the booth. There you can show a prototype of it, and we will be going to Kickstarter with that in October. You can sign up for our mailing list at foxtrotgames.com, or the searchforplanetx.com has a sign-up form where you can get notified of that. And then the one other game that we've announced, as I said, Fox in the Forest surprised us with how well it was received. We love the art, we love the gameplay, and it was great to see the market sort of respond in a similar fashion. But one of the issues is that a lot of couples like to play it, and it was competitive. And so we had this thought, what if you made a cooperative trick-taking game? What would that even look like? Is that even a thing that you could pull off? And some of the inspiration is there are a lot of these games where you're playing in partnership, so it's 2 versus 2. And we thought, could we capture the feel of having a partner without having 2 opponents? And so we tried a number of things and landed on something that we really like, and so we came up with this game, and we'll be putting it out in January with sort of a Valentine's Day promotion. It's called The Fox in the Forest Duet. It is a 2-player cooperative trick-taking game. There's a lot of the same ideas as the original game, so it's a small deck, custom suits numbered 1 through 10. The odd cards have special abilities, but in this one you have a sideboard that has gem tokens on it, and you're trying to move your team through the forest gathering up these gem tokens. And each trick that you play, some of the cards have movement values on them, and based on the movement values on the cards, it'll determine which direction and how far you move your tokens. So another small box game with, we hope, great art, great fairy tale themed art, and that will be out in January. So those are the big things that we have going on. The team has grown a bit. We have a couple of developers, but we mostly work with contractors. So we hire artists and graphic designers and people like that to help us with these things. But there's now 3 of us. So my brother is still somewhat involved, but then there's 3 of us that do all the game development. So we all still have full-time jobs and run all this on the side. And it's been a lot of fun and very rewarding to see so many of our games be so well received in the market. So I think that sums up what I have prepared. I know there's a few people here. I don't know if any of you have questions. If there are no questions, or once there are questions, we can break and I can show you some of the games, or we've got them all down at the booth. So we'll start over here.
Yeah. So when people submit games to you, do they usually come with a prototype already prepared, and then they're like, "Hey, check out my game," or how does that? What's your process?
Yeah.
Accepting?
Yeah, great question. The question, just for the Twitch stream, is when people submit games to us, what state are they in, and what's the process? So, I compared it to book publishing earlier. So usually when you write a complete draft of the book and submit it. Now, and that's typically what we'll get. So we'll have fully functional game prototypes that people will send us, and they'll either email us to meet at conventions or message us on Twitter to say, hey, I got a game I think that might fit your line or your brand. Would you like to take a look? And then we will usually, we ask for a sell sheet usually. That's a one-page sort of overview that says, this is what the game is called, this is how it plays, these are some of the main mechanisms, these are the components, this is why it's unique or why we think it fits your brand, usually with some photos. So that's usually the first step. And even as a very tiny publisher, we get a lot of submissions just from people we've never met. They just email us out of the blue. It still surprises me how many of those come in. For the most part, I think we've only signed one game that's come in that way. So typically, it's people that we already have met or somehow connection with. So the Search for Planet X, we found it's designed by Ben Rossett and Matthew O'Malley. They've done a few other games like Between Two Cities is probably their best-selling game. In 2013, right after Relic Expedition had funded on Kickstarter, I went to a speed pitching event. So designers get tables, and for 1 or 2 or even 4 hours, I think this first one was 4 hours, publishers just rotate table to table, and then they show their game. And Ben was working on a game then called Stranded that was like a wilderness survival camping game, and inspired him when he was camping and it was raining one night. He thought this would be an interesting game. We joked that it would be called competitive camping, but it was like a wilderness survival type game. And so I saw that and really liked it, and he and I worked on it trying to make it as good as possible. But eventually people just wanted it to be cooperative, and we weren't at a point wanting to do a cooperative game. But we stayed in touch with Ben, and so we had talked to him a few different times about a number of different games, and when he had this one, he thought this one would be a good fit for us and reached out to us. He had taught me there's another heavier deduction game called Alchemists that he had taught me how to play, and it has some similarities with a logic puzzle and an app-driven thing. And he said he was trying to make a game that was much lighter and much shorter to play than Alchemist, and wanted to know if I wanted to take a look at it. So that's the story with that one. And again, most of them actually have been people that I follow on Twitter. So Fox in the Forest and Lanterns came in that way. Spy Club came in from someone who we had hired to do graphic design for us. So the games are, like I said, they're usually fully playable, but they don't have any artwork yet, or they have clip art, or just free icons or things like that on them. Or if the theme's really important, you can get photos off the internet that are just placeholder art. And then we'll usually play it and decide if we think there's enough fun here that we would like to manufacture 5,000 of these and try to sell them. And like I said, we look at a lot of submissions, and we try to do 1 or 2 games a year. So that means most of the submissions we say no to. But when we find one that just captures our imagination that we just can't stop thinking about, then we start play testing it as a group. We go to local either cons or designer groups and play test there, and we just start to try to figure out, how does this game fit in the market? What would be a good product positioning for us? Kind of come up with what we think the price point should be, what the components should be. Sometimes we change the theme of the game. So Lanterns originally was about planting flowers and harvesting them to make bouquets. And there are a number of flower games. I'm sure it would have done fine, but it wasn't particularly interesting to me. So we worked with the designer to retheme that, to change its theme. And a lot of times we'll change the components or add elements and work with the designers after that, almost like an editor. So I kind of think of being a game developer at a publishing company as being an editor for this book process. You work with the designer to improve the game, you try changes, you give them feedback, and you kind of work together to get the game into its final state. And then we'll hire artists and graphic designers to help bring the whole product to life. So, yeah. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
So how many successful Kickstarters have you run?
Yeah. Yeah, so we did Relic Expedition, Lanterns, World's Fair, and Spy Club. So that is 4 that we've run on Kickstarter. And then the games that we've released straight to retail, the Lanterns expansion, Fox in the Forest, Sunday Split, and Lanterns Dice. I guess it's 4 and 4 right now. Is that right? Yeah, and then Fox in the Forest Duet will be to retail, and The Search for Planet X will hopefully be our 5th successful Kickstarter. I think that's right.
And my other question is, oftentimes with Kickstarters, there are usually delays in
Mm-hmm.
many of them. What are the most common delays that you've found, and any ways you can help get around them in the future?
Yeah. One of the things that's the hardest to predict is the travel time from the factory to the fulfillment center. So we manufacture in China, and I mean, I guess just the manufacturing time as well. So from the moment you say we're ready to print, everything, all our files look good, let's get started, till when does it get in the fulfillment center is, I mean, you're just estimating, and based on past experience, what you think that will be. And there's only so much you can do to manage that. Obviously, having a good relationship with your manufacturer, if you've worked with somebody before, making sure all your files are right. I mean, I had a horror story on Relic Expedition. We sent the files in. So in Relic Expedition, there are a bunch of hexagon tiles that all sort of lay out to make this board. There are a few features, though. There's like a cave that's 6 tiles altogether. There's a river that's 7 tiles altogether. And on the first game, I did not have as thorough of a proofing process, and so the feature boards were not the hexes in those were not the same size as the tiles by mistake. Graphic designer had taken the like safe area, the sort of bleed area, and made the tiles that big instead of using the right size. So the right approach now, I print everything and cut it out and put it on the table, because then you're like, you can tell if it's too small, is it too big, do the tiles all fit together. Well, so we didn't catch that because I didn't know how to proof that exactly. And I got my first, they manufactured all the games, they mailed me the copy, I opened it up and thought, that's really small. And I was very sad. So there's a pretty big delay there, because they had to take those 2 punch boards out, make 2 new ones with the right sizes, and get them all back, all back packaged up in the boxes. That was a pretty big delay. I think I figured out that was like 7 weeks delay in the Kickstarter delivery. We've not had any issues like that ever again. Most of our games have been simpler than that. The first one was overly complex. So for people running Kickstarters, making your games when you start simpler, I think, is a big step for that. But there are just things that can go wrong after the manufacturing starts, and delays in shipment. I mean, with Spy Club, we had 2 crazy things happen. So we had 2 separate boats, one bringing all the games to North America, and one taking games straight to the UK, where they could be fulfilled to Europe. I don't know what happened with the port where it was supposed to land, but I just kept getting notifications that, like, oh, that port's too busy, we're going to take 5 days to go to a different port. And it just kept delaying and delaying and delaying. And so it was 2 weeks after it was scheduled to arrive that it finally did. On the North American side, we produced a much larger print run for retail as well. So the games all arrived at our warehouse, and then we used Amazon for fulfillment. So we shipped the games we needed to Amazon. Well, I had made a mistake in my Amazon fulfillment order. They'd asked me how many units were coming in and how many were in each case and all this, and somewhere I got confused and said, I'm sending you 50 cases, which I was, and that each case had 1 unit in them, but they each had 10 units in them. And so when they got there, I noticed this, and I emailed Amazon and said, hey, I'm sending you 500 copies, but it only says 50. What went wrong? They're like, oh, it'll be fine. Well, it was not fine. So the games arrived, and every single one, the Amazon person opened it and said, oh, I only thought there would be 1 in here. I'll scan that in, and I'll put the other 9 in unaccounted for inventory somewhere that then they couldn't find for a while. So I'm sitting here, like, up against the deadline of, we had already planned a release date based on, once the games got to the warehouse, we're like, okay, cool, we'll send them to Amazon, to backers, and then we'll release them to retail. Well, they got lost at Amazon. So I was just like, I didn't know what to do. I shipped more into Amazon. I shipped them 500 more, filled out my form correctly, and they mailed them out to backers. And then a few weeks later, they found them. I opened up an inquiry, and they found them, and then they shipped them back to our warehouse. But there's just all kinds of things that can go wrong after that. I mean, it's hard enough making a game. playtesting the game, getting all the files ready, and then after that, there's just a lot of just crazy things that you wouldn't think of. So the more you have done before, when the Kickstarter is done, if you're waiting on art takes a long time, and there are a lot of delays that are, oh, we have 10 more pieces of art to do, and the artist had to go on vacation, and they didn't realize we're going to need all this. There's a lot of delays like that. Just graphic design and art takes a lot of time. We do have enough experience doing those now that we sort of know how long all that takes and try to get as much done as we can. I mean, we are blessed that we have profits from successful games that we can afford to do a lot more of the art beforehand than we used to. With Relic Expedition, we just did the minimum that we could, and then there was a lot of work to do after. So we had planned on all that timing, and even with the 7-week delay from the manufacturing mistake, we still got the game to backers at the very end of our window that we said we would. But it's tough, especially on your first campaign. There's just a lot that can go wrong. So adding in buffer, and even sometimes that's not enough. And when people ask me if they should publish or if Kickstarting is fun, part of me just wants to say no. It's not worth the trouble. So many things will go wrong. You have so many headaches. But obviously, I keep doing it, so I obviously think it's worth it. It is fun, but it is a lot to learn to sort of get over a number of hurdles. Yes.
I guess my question is more on the staffing side.
Mm-hmm.
Indie gaming. What's a good kind of a foundation crew you should look for before you even consider trying to make a game?
Yeah, so the question is about staffing. How many people should you have involved before you try to start making a game? And you'll find a wide variety of numbers of people on different teams and projects. So with game design, it really can just be you making a prototype and then trying to find a publisher. You certainly can do that. And when we started, we had 2 people, an artist, graphic designer, and a game designer. And between the 2 of us, we were able to cover most of the things that needed to be done. And then you can subcontract out a lot of work. So even for, I think, 3 or 4 games, it was just me running the show. So a designer would pitch me a game, I would sign it, and then hire an artist, hire a graphic designer, and then I guess partnering with Renegade helped a lot because they handle the logistics and distribution and marketing side. I think most indies people don't get a marketing person early enough or have one of the founders be good at marketing. And so there are plenty of stories of people who make a great product but nobody knows about it, and then they end up selling half their print run, which if you're lucky, selling half your print run is enough to break even, and then you're stuck with a bunch of inventory. So we finally have brought on somebody to help with marketing for us. But again, we've had Renegade helping us with the retailer side. So we have right now 3 developers who, we're not full-time, but we are thinking about this stuff every week. And we're able to do 1 or 2, I think maybe even 3 games for next year pretty well. But again, it's like book publishing. You can just write a book by yourself and then find a publisher. And as a game designer, you can just make a game with a prototype and then find a publisher. So it's small. And most game publishing companies are smaller than you would think, even the big ones. So it's funny when you talk about indie board game companies, almost even the biggest board game companies are indie. I mean, there's just 3 people or 4 people doing the work. So, I mean, as you grow, a lot of my peers that have gone full time, they have 4 or 5 people that work on the games, 1 marketing person, and usually somebody who has graphic design or art sense, and then a couple of game developers. So you can get a pretty good sized studio cranking out some really good games to a high volume with just 2 or 3 or 4 people as well. So, all right, any other questions? Yes. The question is, what's my favorite game? My mom loves movies, and she has a quote on her wall that says, "People who like movies have a favorite. People who love movies could never choose." So I usually answer that way, that there's so many great games in so many situations. If you're asking what my favorite game I've published is, I cannot answer that. It's like asking who your favorite child is. But of the games I haven't published, I would say the ones that we play the most. We love Pandemic. It's a cooperative game where you're fighting diseases. And then Seven Wonders, which is a competitive drafting game where you're trying to build a civilization. Those are two of the games that over the years, I think they both came out 2008, 9, or 10-ish. We've just continued to play those over the years. So those would be, besides all of my games, if you've got all of the Foxtrot games, then maybe those would be the next two I would try. Yes. You mean like taking games that have gone out of print and bringing them back, or? Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, would we ever do a revival game, bring back an old game? There are a number of companies that do that. There's even one, Restoration Games, that focuses on that. That's all they do. For the most part, that's probably not a thing we would do. They usually have a lot of issues around licensing, trying to find the license. If it's easy to get the license and the game's worth bringing back, then somebody else probably would have. So Restoration Games focuses on that, and one of the co-founders is a lawyer who does a lot of specialty in getting those rights, tracking them down, figuring out who has them, and those kinds of things. So like as a general, this is certainly not a strategy for our company. It's not on our roadmap that in 2 years we want to revive some game. But I mean, anything can happen. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I got this game that I loved, it's like, hey, I know that game. It'd probably be just on a case-by-case basis. If something fell into my lap where getting the IP was going to be easier for me than for someone else, and I had some love of the game, from my childhood or something like that, I could see it happening. So I'm not opposed to it, but I think the legal barriers would probably be too high for somebody in my position to try to overcome. And again, if I could overcome it, a lot of other people probably could too. People with a lawyer on staff who might be better suited to do something like that. All right. Well, I think that's it. So thank you all so much for coming and for the time. And if you have any questions you want to ask after we cut the stream, feel free to. And we'll be down in booth 901 for the whole show, except when I'm up here. I should be down there where we can show you in more detail any of these particular games. So, all right. Thank you, everyone.